welcome back. And as was mentioned earlier in the show, we're having a conversation with representatives of the National Institute of Culture and History, speaking to some of the concerns that were raised by FECTAB in our show yesterday. So we're at this time joined by President of NICH, Diane Haylock, and Director of the Institute of Archaeology, Dr. John Morris. Good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Riley.
Thank you for having us on your show this morning too.
So obviously, FECTAB held a press conference raising certain concerns regarding several things, and we're hoping to be able to address those this morning. But let me just start off by finding out what particular comment or remark that they have put out to the media what about what they said has prompted a response from NICH at this point in time? Usually you guys have your meetings behind closed doors and try to resolve your matters.
Indeed, Marlene. Good morning, listeners and viewers. It is a pleasure for us to be here this morning. And yes, we are responding to some of the issues that were made. Mm-hmm. It should be clear that there are issues that pertain to different agencies, but those that refer to the archaeological sites, as you know, are under the control of NICH. And there are rules and regulations pertaining to how those reserves are used. Mm-hmm. Many rules and regulations have been in place over the course of operating these sites, you know, but as you get more and more into running them and ensuring them that they operate as parks that are of a world-class standard, you have to make sure that you have the right rules and regulations. You are, of course, at all times concerned about the users of the sites. We, of course, must always be concerned about protecting the integrity of the sites, because, you know, first and foremost, that is our responsibility. Mm-hmm. To protect these this heritage, you know, that has been put into our care. But at the same time, we utilize the sites to be able to afford people an opportunity to recreate and enjoy themselves. And we are basically then able to generate some income for the ongoing maintenance and operation of those sites, but overall to contribute to the implementation of the national culture agenda in the country of Belize.
So in terms of what they have presented as their concerns, yes, so far, what is it that is concerning you the most that you'd like to address?
Well, in 2014, not NICH alone, but I think it was the Bureau of Standards.
And the industry,
the tourism industry as a whole, developed and legislated a health and safety standards manual. Mm-hmm. That was actually made law. Mm-hmm. in July of 2014. And what that manual basically did, mm-hmm, was to enshrine, if you will, the rules and regulations as they pertain to the management of archaeological sites. Mm-hmm. As I said before, many of those rules and regulations were not necessarily new, but that legislation put it so that everybody was on the same page with what the rules and regulations were.
Everybody as in who? Who were the stakeholders who were involved in putting together the manual?
All right.
Well, a number of in fact, the production of this manual took us several years to get to the point where we could legislate.
Yeah.
We had several meetings with stakeholders. These are tour operators, tour guides, people who are specialists in cave training, specialists in cave explorations, and a number of other organizations, particularly the NGOs who also run different kinds of reserves around the country. And so we all met together, looked at all our rules and all the regulations that we have, combined them together so that we could have a document or a set of rules that are applicable across several of the reserves in the country. In our case, particularly for cave, it is very important because not only are the cave repositories of ancient Maya remains, but caving is actually a very dangerous exercise. And given the burgeoning tourism in this country, you have seen the increase of overnight visitors, you've seen the volume of cruise ship tours. We realized we had to do something because we were one step away from some major action.
There were no formal health and safety regulations in place before?
Before. We had the Bureau of Standards, because they're the ones who literally helped us to create this document. You had some of those before, and in many areas we had manuals such as these that the Institute of Archaeology provided. We have a cave policy that whenever we did cave training for tour guides or tour operators, we would introduce them to that. But this is a legal document that we now use and we are beginning to enforce. The discussions we've had, for instance, last year, December, we had a huge discussion at the George Price Center where we went through a number of these things. In fact, we revised a little bit of this, particularly, for instance, the height requirements. And so...
And those are some of the issues I want to get into, but let me ask very clearly. Were any of the representatives of FECTAB involved in the consultation period of putting together the manual? Yes,
Mr. Greenwood and Yoni and all of those were part of this process here.
Okay.
I mean, they work at Caves Branch. Cave Branch is one of the areas where, or NICH that we, that's one of the areas where most cave tubing takes place in this country.
Yes.
And so they were all involved in it, you know. They were asked their suggestions. They even sent in...
This was in the December meeting?
No,
or prior
to that.
Prior to that.
They even sent in all their recommendations themselves.
That process began in 2013.
Okay.
You know, it was actually a part of our making tourism benefit communities adjacent to archaeological sites. So that process started, the consultation started from way back in 2013.
Now, we are aware at the end of last year, as you point out with your December meeting, that FECTAB did come forward about this very same manual and some of what it stipulates. And one of the main issues was the height requirement. And just to kind of summarize what they say, they claim that their main population that they work with are families, which means that they have shorter persons who don't meet the height requirements, and therefore putting in these height requirements takes away a lot of the business that they have access to. I knew that we knew that the meeting took place in December and that the height requirement was changed.
Yes.
So in your mind, these concerns that are coming forward now, were they discussed in December, and it's just a matter of it not necessarily meeting the health and safety regulations that you wanted to be able to put in this manual?
Well, I mean, to a large extent, the reduction of the height requirement from 48 to 40 inches has allowed us to allow the tour operators and tour guides to bring in smaller children. But beyond that, you're talking about babies. And within a cave environment, that is a no-no. It's very difficult to put a helmet on a baby or a life vest. And given the fact that NICH has reached its carrying capacity, you have thousands of people who go through that cave on a daily basis. We needed to make sure that the enforcement of the rules, particularly the height requirements, the life vests and the helmets, were being adhered to. In fact, late last year, October, November, we spoke to a number of our stakeholders and said, look, we had told you a year before that we are going to implement these rules on the 1st of December. They asked us if we could do it the 1st of January, so that at least they could get ready. And so we waited until the 1st of January to start implementing the rules and enforcement of the rules.
No, but I want to clarify that, John, because these rules and regulations, as we said, they existed before the manual, and we, to be honest, we were not really focused on enforcement. And one can always bring that back to us at NICH for not having really been dealing with the enforcement part of it. But once the manual was developed, we let them know from the time the manual was actually published that we would be enforcing these rules and regulations in January of 2015, right? It was January of 2015, where a year later, and even in the course of 2015, we did some of the enforcement, but we were not firm in it because there were still concerns being raised that we did not, that the stakeholders did not have the necessary equipment, you know, all the gears that they needed. And so there was a little bit of laxity on our part in the actual enforcement. But there has to be a point at which you say, no, this is the rule, these are the rules, these are the regulations, you must abide by them. So we let them know sometime in October of last year that come January 2016, we would be strict with the enforcement part of things.
Now, one of the very specific allegations that the local cruise operators are making is that the enforcement is not being done across the board. And I want to be able to address that. They speak even about booths, obviously, in the public spaces that are set up. However, in private spaces, specifically they pointed out Chukka's Cave and Dark Knight, that they do not have the same level of regulation that they're seeing where they work at Caves Branch.
Well, I mean, Chukka works at Caves Branch. I mean, Chukka accesses the same caves that most of the local tour operators do at North End. So they have to pass through the same set of rangers that we have out there. In fact, on a daily basis, I think operators such as Chukka, actually, we are more stringent with them because it's a larger set of numbers that they have. We really have to ensure that they abide by the 1 to 8 rules. They bring 500 people. A local operator will bring 6, 8. And so it's easier to actually supervise them as opposed to a larger operations like Chukka that has hundreds and hundreds of people that they're bringing. And in fact, the daylight, dark night cave, we keep 2 rangers out there during the cruise ship days, which is the time when you have most of the visitors for that particular site. And the dark night cave system also too is one of those cave systems where we had to do highly specialized training for the people who were running the zip line through that cave. I mean, there was 6 months of training using HAT International, a really professional zipline operation developer who has done all the work in Costa Rica and Jamaica. So all of those things had to be put in place before Dark Night Cave even began to operate. And every 6 months, there is a report generated by this company that is sent directly to us.
By Dark Night?
No, it is sent by HAT International because they need to establish the integrity of the operations. One of those zip lines runs through a cave, and so that is a concern of us, you know.
So just tell me directly in terms of the allegation that is being made that they are not being regulated in the same manner or to the same manner that the local operators are. They're being checked for the list of equipment that is necessary for that they're using the actual tubes that should be used and everything that is outlined within this manual. Are they being held to the same standard?
In fact, I think they're being held to an even higher standard, because you have to remember that Chukka and Dark Knight, they deal with NCL, with the cruise lines, and the cruise lines are even more stringent when it comes to the fact that the people that they send to Belize are safe. And so it's a higher set of standards, really, especially in terms of the tubing and the helmets. They use much more costlier tubes and much more costlier helmets. We have actually dropped a little bit for the local tour operators, allowing them to use helmets that may not conform to the regulated ones and tubes that may not conform to the regulated ones. Primarily because we recognize that there's a cost involved. But Chukka and Dark Knight, they are very professional in their operations. They have to be, because they have a liability issue.
If I may add to what John has said, and Marlene, maybe it's important to try to get people to understand the situation. At NICH, we have established rangers who run the park, for us. And there's also the tourism police out there. But we have made it very clear to our people that it is their responsibility to ensure then that people who are using the cave at NICH are actually abiding by the rules. And since we started this new process then of ensuring and enforcing the rules and regulations then, they have been much more rigid about it. Now, the thing about daylight, dark night, for instance, is that the cave system is on private property. So the people who established the daylight, dark night tours, they then actually had to get permission from NICH to be able to use those caves. So there was a whole process to do the due diligence.
It's a co-management agreement?
No. We don't want to use the word co-management, about it.
And I think it's a great point to clarify, because obviously when people hear about the Dark Knight situation, one of the first comments is, how do you have privately owned caves, which is not something that can take place. It is on private property.
It is on private property, right? So
what is the arrangement that is made with them? So
there is an agreement with them that they can utilize the caves, and part of their operation involves a zip line, that runs through one of the 3 caves that they actually use, right? And so they have to pay a fee for the utilization of those caves. And it is the same fee that is charged for the users of NICH, right? The concern about regulations there, for instance, as was said before, NICH is a big operation. It is thousands of people pass through that. It has reached its carrying capacity, in fact, and one of the things that we are actually looking at is to find other caves that can be used, to bring down the pressure on that particular site. Now, daylight, dark night, it is a private operation, and their contracts are directly with the cruise lines. So by and large, cruise visitors come to the sites pretty much Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Those are cruise ship days, right? Monday, Friday, weekends, hardly any, right? Now, for us then, what we have basically done is ensure that on cruise ship days, that there are rangers out there monitoring and ensuring then that daylight, dark night is actually following the rules and regulations. So if you say that NICH does not have people out there on Monday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday, That is absolutely true, because we're basically there on the days that the high visitation takes place.
And for us it is
As
important
opposed
because,
to
yes.
NICH, Jane, where the ranger is stationed there.
Full time.
Full-time.
Full-time.
Yes.
So that is where
Right.
that concern from them
And-
is coming from. That's
And
the root of
we
it.
intend to, to get to the full-time part, because daylight, dark night has been in operation since when?
Less than a year.
It's very recent.
Yes,
Yes.
very recent. And one of the things about it too is that essentially, in terms of the monitoring that is required, the ranger would be stationed very close to the entrance of the first cave, which is that you climb up a hill and you get to the first open near cave, and that's where they dress people. But one has to realize that the operation there can only run maybe 10, 15 people per trip, because of the complexity of running the zip line. They have like 30 guys who have to string you up and run you through. Whereas NICH N is a totally different case, where you have kids. So we have more rangers there. Then the zip line doesn't operate on the weekends. So, and that's the only area that we really deal with when it comes to the dark night. They have other operations like river rafting, trails, and so, but that's not our concern.
So let's take a look at the broader picture here. We have local tour operators who, quite frankly, get the smaller piece of the pie with the passengers who come off the cruise ships and who go on tours.
Yes.
Already, that is established because of how the system works. People book their tour from the ship directly, and they work with the foreign companies. What is being done on your part to ensure that these persons who have been operating for quite some time, they speak of their own safety record and what they have been doing to be able to keep their business going? What do you do on your part to ensure, yes, that the persons who access these facilities are safe, and that there are standards in place, and that there isn't any harm or done to the site itself, but also to ensure that this population of entrepreneurs can still be able to thrive in the environment?
Well, Annie, we do not have any control over who uses these sites. Any company that comes and says we want to utilize the site are allowed to use the site. Now, the issue of small
Tour operators.
tour operators or even groups of tour guides. Now, it is clear that they may have challenges acquiring the necessary equipment, because, if you buy in bulk, it's cheaper, right? So, for instance, in the course of having conversations with them over the years, we have said to them directly, work together cooperatively. I mean, you don't have to form a cooperative, but you can work together cooperatively to be able to acquire your equipment. Perhaps if you work together as a group, you can get the Ministry of Finance to give you concessions to be able to bring in your equipment without having to pay, all the taxes and what have yous. But it is not NICH's responsibility, to make special concessions to the people who use the parks as they pertain to the regulations. You have to have regulations that apply across the board. As we said, we made a significant adjustment with the height regulation, going from 48 to 40. Requests were being made to bring it down further to 36. Now, I mean, at some point, ultimately, we represent the government of Belize. If a tragedy occurs, who's going to get knock? Not those operators. It is going to be the government of Belize. And we must at all times bear in mind our responsibility, as I said, to the integrity of those sites, and also to ensure that we're not putting the government of our country in this sort of, position.
I would just like to highlight one incident. I don't know if you recall the incident of a young boy in Toledo at Blue Creek Cave that died in the cave, and up to this day hasn't been found. I mean, it's a very unfortunate and tragic incident, but it occurred primarily because too many people were going in with only one guide. There was no helmets, no vests, no lights, and we were taken to task for that. It is our responsibility. We are allowing people to use these caves, and they're going into the caves without the proper equipment, without the proper training, and so you end up with a young boy losing his life. And
that's a less traffic cave system in the country.
Yes, and it's less traffic.
And usually used a lot by people within the community itself.
Yes, but you can sense the dangers that occur. I mean, we have other caves in the country, the ATM cave, where you don't hear any of these kinds of allegations. Again, the regulations are enforced extremely at the ATM cave because it is an even more dangerous system. Less than a month ago, we had to call out our cave rescue team at 6 o'clock in the evening to take 14 tourists out of the cave because the river levels rose up without, I mean, just you have a weather storm and the river levels goes up, and that kind of incident occurs regularly. You don't hear it on the media, but it occurs regularly. And so it's all of these kinds of things that we, as an institution, we are very cognizant of it, and we're very cognizant that it only takes one incident and Belize gets a black eye. You know, the young lady that died in the western part of the country, it was on Yahoo, it was all over the world.
But let me ask, the concerns that are being brought out now, are you going to have a sit down with FECTAB? Are you going to discuss this further? And is there room for compromise beyond what has already been reached before?
Marlene, we are always willing to meet with our stakeholders. Any operation like this, one must have a more cooperative approach rather than an antagonistic approach. But at some point, after you've done your consultations, you've got to put the rules and the regulations in place. And you cannot keep changing those rules and regulations, right? We made a significant change when we went from the 48 to the 40. You can say that you have been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. That does not mean that it does not require these rules and regulations, because you know it takes one incident to give you a few black eyes, not even just one. And ultimately, as I said, we represent the government of this country. So yeah, the way I see it right now, I don't know where the room for further negotiation is, because these rules are there. They have been looked at, we have consulted on them, and we have made these decisions, and we are enforcing them.
And you are maintaining that they knew that the regulations were going to be enforced as of January 1st.
Yes.
That was communicated to them.
They knew this, and they have known not for 1 year, not for 2 years, right? I mean, I've been in my position for nearly 8 years now, right? And so I've been involved in these discussions over the years, right? We have consulted, we have listened, but you know, in consultations, you don't necessarily get everything you want at the end of the day, right? I don't know what the other issues might be that we can make compromises on, but people have got to abide by these rules.
Primarily the height requirements, the signage that is up, that they feel that it's scaring the visitors that they're bringing, because there are all these rules and regulations that are there. And they also pointed out the list of equipment that needs to be taken into the cave is just too much. Because it's outlined, and I've seen the list in here. There's quite a long list of stuff that needs to be taken into the caves, and they're saying that's way too much, it's too heavy, and several other points.
I mean, you do not see. I mean, if that were true, that was true. You do not see a decline in the number of visitors going to the cave. In fact, Nho is one of those caves where the numbers are increasing.
But we also have more visitors coming into the country.
More visitors coming into the country. So the allegation that the equipment and all that is stopping them from, that's not true. That's not true. In fact, all over the country, you have people accessing these caves, different caves, and you do not have the same kind of complaints that, in fact, we have for ATM and for other parts of the country. Tour operators and tour guides are actually clamoring for us to come out and do more training, and also to not only do more training, but also to ensure that the rules are being adhered to. The Toledo Tour Guides Association have asked repeatedly, in fact, they want to drop the ratio from 1 to 8 to 1 to 4 because they feel that is much better for them.
Tour guide to tourists to visitors ratio. Now, because we can't go through every concern that they've listed, and but I think the ultimate issue is this: you have put together your health and safety regulations policy. It is now legislation, as you pointed out. It's and we are hearing concerns now after the fact, concerns some that were raised before. So are you saying that this policy will stand as is?
Well, my lady, we made the change from the 48 to the 40 already, right?
Because the policy says 48, but we have adjusted to 40. As
so the policy stays as is?
Yes. As the president, there are rooms for negotiation, but to a large extent, one needs to have a uniform policy that for the entire country. It's not just for one particular site. We have within our administrative system at NICH that each of the site has a operational manual, and because the sites are all different, what may work at one site may not
and the
necessarily
threats
work
are different.
And so there are those areas that we can negotiate and that we can compromise on. But overall, your policy is your policy. You see, it's not. We're not saying that the policy is written in stone, but whatever compromise one has to make, one has to take into consideration two important things. The first is that the safety of the visitor, whether the visitor is local or foreigner, that is extremely critical and important. The second aspect, which is even more important, is the integrity of the site you're visiting. If we destroy that, for generations to come, we won't have anything. Belize is considered as a world-class destination. We need to keep it that way. And to keep it that way, we have to elevate not only our performance as a tour guide or tour operator, but a performance as a regulating entity and an entity that manages these reserves.
Now, before we wrap, because we're running out of time, there is one more issue that I wanted to address, and I can have you speak directly to it. And it is, of course, what we're seeing playing out at this point with the Dark Knight cave operation, the owner. This has been an issue brought forward by FECTAB, looking at just the process that took place for, you call it daylight, dark night cave
system.
Yes. For them to be able to access it, whether or not other persons can access, and how agreements like this are made, especially when it comes to cave systems that are essentially for all Belizeans.
But there's no exclusivity to that particular cave system. I mean, Daylight Dark Night Cave company has permission to enter the caves, but anyone else can enter the cave as long as they pay us the required fee, and as long as they abide by the rules and regulations. So I don't see what the issue would be there.
I mean, you have to enter the cave, that entrance to the cave, because there are other entrances. But I mean, you're talking about going into, forest, over the hills and so forth. You have to enter via their property, right? And that is an issue that is between Daylight, Dark Night, and other people who may want to utilize, the cave.
So they don't have access to the cave?
Well,
They do.
They do?
They do. They have access to the cave. They can
If they would use one of the other entrances that goes through forest.
No, in fact, this particular one that's on the screen here, you can enter this for cave tubing from two different approaches. So if you want to go to this cave here, you can go. You may not necessarily pass through my yard, but you can go. You know, and the same for the other two caves. So there's no exclusivity for that particular cave system. You know, if you so desire to go to those caves and you have the wherewithal to get there, then you can go. But you will have to pay us a fee.
Okay. And of course, just final points, because we are completely out of time at this point. Since all these allegations are being made, what do you think that is the most important point that the public needs to understand, given all that they've heard in terms of the concerns of the local tour operators?
I mean, I think that there's a number of stakeholders involved: NICH, the Belize Tourism Board, the Ministry of Natural Resources, Health and the Public Health Bureau. There's a number of agencies that are involved within the tourism industry in this country. And to single out NICH as the only entity, it appears as though we control everything. We do not. We simply control the archaeological reserve. And that is where our jurisdiction ends. It starts there and ends there. So I think that a lot of times when we are accused of some of these things, it's really the purview of other agencies. In our case, we work with all of these agencies to develop a product that can benefit us in Belize here, economically, socially, and culturally. But we have to understand that we cannot kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Dialogue is important, Marlene. One has to always be open to talk. As John said, there are other government entities that are also involved in some of the issues that FECTAB raised. And we try to ensure as well that there is conversation and discussions, between us, because we don't want for our different government agencies to seem to be at loggerheads, with each other. So we will continue to have conversations with our fellow government agencies to try to see how best we can ensure that all the parties are satisfied. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that we are regulators, and we have to ensure that those rules and regulations are being, followed by all, right? There is no special rule for this set, versus this set, right? And we are trying our best to ensure that that occurs.
All right. Well, we appreciate you joining us this morning to be able to share your perspective on this particular issue. And we hope that we've brought some clarity to all of the conversations that have been taking place as well. Thank you for joining
Thank
me.
you for the opportunity.
Thank you for having us.
Going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, the conversation continues with tourism, but this time we'll be speaking to the Belize Tourism Board, so stay tuned.